Terraria has so many mods that it can be hard to figure out which ones you should try, and unless you watch creators who exclusively talk about mods, you probably only see anyone ever play Calamity. Well, I've decided I'm going to search for smaller content mods and see what hidden gems or stinkers there are on tmodloader. This month we'll be checking out the Polarities mod, which will actually prove to be a much larger mod than I was ready for, but here we go. Now, a little housekeeping at the start. My objective was to get through the whole mod in 1 month, so I added a couple of quality of life mods so I could get through it faster, and I enabled cheat sheet so I could skip some of the grinding. For the first chunk of the playthrough, I'll keep my use of cheat sheet to a minimum, but I'll have to use it much more in the future, and I'll talk about why later. Now, tmodloader, as of the time I did this playthrough, has yet to update to 1.4.4, which it did update on August 1st, so it's been 2 weeks, but this was before it updated. But Polarities actually hasn't been fully ported to 1.4 yet, and most of the endgame stuff is still only 1.3. So we'll experience what has been added to 1.4 at this moment, and then we'll check out what there currently is on 1.3, but it'll likely be changed relatively soon, hopefully, though the mod might not be under development anymore. We'll talk about that a little later. In the desert, I came across my first piece of modded content. There's this tiny little rattlesnake in my path, and he kind of looks like a regular critter, so I unsuspectingly approached him, and he one-shot killed me for my troubles. I am already liking this mod. Now, I should also mention that I'm going into this mod and all the ones in the future totally blind. All I know is what's on the mod page you can check before you download any mod. I also have boss checklists, which I have mixed feelings about since I want to be more surprised by bosses, but I also know I'd definitely miss several of them if I didn't have it enabled, so I guess it'll just have to be there. I explored most of the surface to see if there were any special biomes or other enemies the mod added, but didn't find anything other than the rattlesnake, so I started mining straight down to see if there was anything to be found underground. And sure enough, after a bit of mining and finding this glitched out pot I'm calling Jerry, I found nothing. So I went back to the surface and checked with the guide to see if there was anything modded that I can make with the ores and stuff that I had found. And I discovered that there is a weapon class called Warhammers. These have a fun little animation and you charge them up to do more damage, or maybe just damage in the first place. They're kind of cool, but also a little clunky to use. I tried for a bit, but gave up on them since they weren't good enough for the effort. Now, I did finish exploring the surface to confirm there was nothing interesting to be found. When I returned underground though, and mined just a little bit deeper, I ran into a pool of water that was giving me a debuff I didn't recognize, and it was killing me really fast. This made things a little difficult, but I knew I must have found some sort of modded content. And sure enough, I found what I'm dubbing the salt biome. I would end up spending way too much time in this biome. The water will kill you kind of fast, so you want to avoid it, but there are also slimes down there with slightly different AI, and they're faster. Plus, there are these stupid little bugs that fly around and give you the confusion debuff, but not something like 5 or 10 seconds, no. These things give you a half-second confusion debuff, and then it goes away and comes back again. So there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to move around without killing a bunch of these tiny little bugs. And when you have a Warhammer, doing this is painful at best. Flails are where you want to go to take these bugs out. But the enemies down here, including these clam things, drop salt crystals, and with those crystals you can craft a bunch of modded gear, so I kept going back and dying over and over again, since you really don't get a whole lot of salt crystals for your trouble. Grinding this out was a little annoying, but I might have just been undergeared for this biome. The first thing I crafted was salt armor, which, as expected, gave me the set bonus that made me immune to the salt biome's water debuff. The armor was fine, but for the trouble I went through to get it, I'd probably have been better off just farming for platinum. I kept going back though, since I wanted these salt knives that stacked up to 5 times, and these things were absolutely worth it. They have very short range, but they're able to keep most enemies from touching you and do a good amount of damage. I held on to them for quite a while. I left the salt biome alone after that, though I did discover that there are more in the world, so it might not be guaranteed you'd get one beneath spawn like I did, but there do seem to be plenty around. Now at this point, I thought I would probably be geared enough to take on the first boss of the run. This boss is meant to be fought after King Slime, but I was pretty sure I could beat King Slime if I wanted to, I just didn't have any way of summoning him, so we're taking on the Cloudfish. This boss is actually summoned by flying a kite on a windy day, or at least a specific kind of kite. I think I made it work on a non-windy day by holding left click or something, but it's kind of fun that you summon a boss using a kite. The boss itself though was equally as fun, and a great first impression for the mod's bosses. It is a super early game boss, so it's not the fanciest thing in the world, but I think it fits in well with the vanilla game. It's got some simple dash attacks and also creates damaging rain clouds that prevent you from running too far away without taking damage. This is actually something this mod does a lot, where bosses will create confined areas for you when you're meant to fight them, so the whole running away strategy doesn't work for a lot of them. You can often get outside these barriers though, but at the cost of some health. What made me really like this boss was when it started shooting lightning though. It's got a few different lightning attacks, and I just love lightning themed weapons and attacks, so this made me very happy. Although, I must say, it wasn't the most reliable thing. There were times the lightning went right through me, and I have no idea if I'm only meant to take damage if I'm at the end points of the blast or not. The hitboxes for me were a little weird and felt inconsistent, but it did allow me to dodge more than I should have and led to my victory. He dropped some materials to craft a few things, but most importantly, he dropped this hook that grabs onto thin air. You can use this to search space without wings or grab potions or anything. It's so much fun, and it's not actually as broken as you might think. The hook must always fully extend, and if it hits any blocks on its path, then it'll retract and grabs onto nothing. So it's really hard to use underground, if not kind of impossible. I tried using it for boss battles too, but it pulled me in so slowly that it left me wide open for attack. I crafted a mage weapon from the materials the cloudfish dropped, and it shoots these flopping little fishies, and I think it's fun watching them flop on the ground. Down in the caves, I found another mini biome I'm calling the toxic biome. There were some cool enemies, but it was overall less interesting than the salt biome, and after using recipe browser to figure out what I could craft from a few of the things that were dropped down there, it looked like many of the things that I could craft with the stuff wasn't available till hard mode. There were a few things I could make, but it just wasn't nearly as interesting as the salt biome to me. It felt kind of like a granite biome, kind of cool to look at, but not a whole lot to be gained from it. The next modded boss was the Star Construct, and I felt I could take it on even though I hadn't fought the Eye yet, who's supposed to be before this one. It's kind of cool too, since it drops from the sky, and until you hit it a few times, it won't wake up and fight you, so you could probably use a spawner, realize you forgot your potions, ignore it, grab your potions, and then hit it a few times without needing another spawner. This boss has a star theme, if you didn't get that from Star Construct being its name, and it attacks you with star projectiles and its robotic tentacles like Dr. Octopus. It also has a few dashing attacks, and it's an interesting fight overall. It also has one in particular that's designed where the best way to dodge is moving close to the body and not away from it. It's a little counterintuitive, but the arms themselves don't do damage, only the very ends of them. I did a whole bunch of exploring after that since I lost the first fight pretty badly. I took down the Eye, and its dash was incredibly helpful during the second fight against the Star Construct. I also built an arena, which was equally as helpful. Thing is though, when I saw what could be crafted, they all sounded so interesting, and I just had to have it all. I made the tome and the sword with the first batch, and the tome was kinda cool, it shoots like a wall of stars, though it was a little limited in its uses, and the sword was kinda just stupid. I should also mention though, this thing drops an item that lets you fast forward time like nobody's business. This is kind of broken for how early you can get it, and I love it. I ended up getting the full armor set, which is a ranger set with a bonus that gives you a dash. Pretty cool. Armor sets that give you dashes and open up one of your precious accessory slots are kind of interesting, so I'm glad they added this. There was also a crossbow that shoots stars, but realistically, who's going to use that? The real star of the show, though, was the summon. You get this winged star creature that appears to exist in the third dimension, and this summon alone made me main summoner class for the longest time. This easily outclasses any pre-hard mode summon in vanilla. Perhaps the main reason for this too is that they have good range and high accuracy, and well, they also have a solid damage output. I took out the Eater of Worlds, and it dropped this weird weapon I could never figure out how to use properly, which sucks, but I wanted to mention it since not every mod adds things to vanilla bosses, and while this one doesn't do a whole lot, it would appear that they have rare chances of dropping modded weapons, and I only got the Eater of Worlds one in my run. The next boss on the modded list was the Gigabat. This boss threw me for a bit of a loop at first. It summons a metric ton of tiny bats that circle you, and the main boss body hides amongst these bats, only occasionally coming out to attack you. This means it has meat shields for a lot of the fight, and unless your arena is pretty well lit, the boss can be really hard to see. The boss's patterns were also hard to detect at first. The little bats move in discernible patterns, and based on how they move, you need to dodge in a different way. On top of this, there is not an order for the different attack patterns. Each time I fought it, the bats would attack in a different order, sometimes repeating the same attack over and over. I really like this since it adds a little more randomness to the fight, and it makes it more interesting. He was a little bit of a challenge, at least. I also wouldn't recommend Summoner against him since they have a hard time knowing to attack the big bat and not all the many little ones since they always replenish. You can't get rid of them all. But I did switch to full Summoner again after the Gigabat. I fought Skeletron, and apparently 2 people can sit in one chair. I had no idea. There was nothing new I found in the dungeon, and before I went to the Wall of Fresh, I figured I should swap out my current Summoner armor for the Beeswax one since I want to focus on minions, and the modded armor set is basically an in-between of the Flink's fur robe and the bee armor. Also, to illustrate my point of how good the star minions are, they perform very well against Queen Bee. On top of that, they also did very well against the Wall of Fresh, which I beat after making a quick hell bridge. There was a rather large area of lava to the left that I discovered while making the bridge, and it turns out this is actually a modded biome, which makes sense. No vanilla generation would look like this, but since the mod messed with how the vanilla underworld generated rather than adding any kind of new blocks or what have you, it was kind of hard to tell that it was modded at first. Now that I was in hard mode, I encountered a king cobra in the desert, though it's called a spitter in Polarities. Very dangerous. Also kind of funny how the first thing to kill me at the start of the game and the start of hard mode was a snake in the desert. Also, the pirate invasion spawned on literally the first, or maybe it was the second day of hard mode. So that was stupid, and I didn't get any modded content from it either. This is also when the run turned a lot more into me using cheat sheet to ensure I could complete the mod within the time I allowed myself. I'm simply working on too many projects, and in the future I'll be giving more time to other mods than I have been able to give to Polarities. This also means that since I use cheat sheet to get to all the bosses and events, that I didn't go through natural progression, and thus my builds were not necessarily the best. But again, in the future I'm hoping to make these videos with little to no use of cheat sheet since I only really want to use it to remove certain amounts of grinding, but keep it to a minimum. But since this is the first video of its kind that I'm making, I ended up biting off a bit more than I could chew. But I still wanted to get through everything and show you what all it has to offer, or at least what the bosses are. I still did do a good amount of mining though, and I stopped by the ocean for some reason, I forget why, but I found some super cool stuff down there. For one, there was this massive passive mob called a sunfish, and it's just cool. It has a lot of health too, and it never attacked me, so I think it really is just a passive mob with a lot of health, and I really like that. There was also this water snake that attacked me, and this is legitimately one of my favorite modded mobs ever. It's simple, but it's a water snake, and it's just plain cool. Okay, I love the water snake. It also drops some venom glands, which can be used to craft several things. There are going to be a number of modded weapons I'm going to miss, and well, that could be a lot of them. And I'm going to miss them too on other 1 month 1 mod experiences, since the point of these runs isn't to check out everything, but to check out a regular run on the mod. This one just devolved into cheat sheet for the sake of being able to make this video. Although from what I've been told, the main developer is no longer working on the project. I mentioned earlier that this mod might not be in production anymore, so the lead mod might be gone and development might actually have come to a stop. I didn't find anything confirming this, and apparently someone else is porting it, but work has kind of come to a stop, which is really sad because as this video continues, I love this mod more and more. I fought the mechs afterwards, and there's this special armor they drop. I got the helm, which shoots a laser whenever you attack. It's so much fun. The others are less interesting, but now my head is a laser. The first thing I did after beating the mechs was start traveling to the hollow biome. I knew there was something there that I needed, but I didn't expect to be immediately greeted by the Rapture event. And this event is spectacular. There are Pegasuses flying around, and I love Pegasi. Pegasuses, but whatever. Sun Warriors. There's also various different kinds of pixies, including these ones called Pain Bows, which is kind of hilarious. The event changes as you go along, with certain enemies no longer spawning as new ones start spawning. Once the event was beaten, I was actually greeted by the Sun Pixie boss too. Kind of sucks that the boss spawns immediately after the event was over, since I was not ready for it at all, but at least it gave me a non-consumable spawner so I could re-summon it, which I did. But after losing several fights and trying a couple of different loadouts, I was never able to even get that close to beating the boss. And for the sake of getting to all the other bosses before the end of the month, I gave up and used Cheat Sheet to progress, which I hated doing. Still not sure how to take down this boss, and that'll remain true for some of the other bosses upcoming. Maybe I'm just bad, maybe it's because I used Cheat Sheet to skip some important steps, but these bosses are really tough. The Pestilence event was up next in progression, and this event was a little less enjoyable. The enemies were kind of interesting, but I also struggled with understanding the patterns of some of the enemies, or even just how to dodge them, which is another thing I had problems with throughout a lot of this mod, including the Sun Pixie. Though the enemies were also pretty strong and hard to take down, which might be because I didn't play the mod properly, but I don't know. Defeating this event summons the Esophage, I think it's pronounced, called, whatever, which is kind of a spooky boss. This one I was able to beat the first time, though the weapon I used to take it down with was called the Twisted Tendrils, but I had a stack of 9,999 of them instead of the normal max of 3, because I got them through Cheat Sheet and I didn't know that there was a stack limit at first. This resulted in a weapon that basically one-shot all enemies, which, I mean, I think that's kind of worth it just for the sake of discovering I could do that. But I could have taken him down without this cheated weapon. I fought him another time or two and he felt reasonably balanced. Though the boss was a little bugged, after dying to him, he'd stick around, go to space, continue attacking me while out of range, and then randomly disappear. The next boss was the Connective Wanderer, and this boss is so freaking epic that I'm just going to play some of the footage of what happened. Now the rest of the mod is not yet in 1.4, so I had to make a new character and world in 1.3, which was a trip. It's been a long time since I played Terraria in 1.3, and boy oh boy does it make you love 1.4.4 so much. Now I prepped for post Moonlord, but I missed that there's a pre-wall boss I needed to take down first called the Rift Denizen. I summoned it just to see what it would do, not expecting much, but then this pre-wall boss killed a post-Moonlord character in short order. And this shocked me so much that I summoned it a few more times to figure out what was going on. Turns out this boss and future ones actually cause a debuff that lowers your max health. And this basically removes the benefit of strong armor. I liked it so much that I downgraded to on-tier gear so I could fight it for real. But then after one really quick defeat, I grew confused and went back to post-Moonlord gear so I could figure out this boss a bit better. It shoots this crazy laser that, in my opinion, didn't have a very clear way to dodge, but it would seem being close to it is better, or avoid kind of where it turns into a pure circle. I also fought it legit with post-Moonlord gear and still lost several times because I brought it to 0 and then it wouldn't die. And then since I didn't quite understand its attacks, it would kill me. Maybe I'm just bad, but this boss has me scratching my head and is very tough. Still really cool. I did end up taking it down, but don't ask me how, I didn't change anything. The next boss was the Self-Similar Sentinel, which is an interesting name, who's a post-Plantera boss, but pre-Golem, which is an odd spot for a boss, I think. Thing is, after taking down the Denizen, this thing in the sky spawned and I was able to teleport to this new dimension. I have never seen any of these new dimensions in tmodloader before, and it was freaking awesome! This place is crazy cool, and now I'm excited for other mods that use the subworld library. The Sentinel down here is a neat boss fight, and his patterns were actually something that I kind of understood and could read a whole lot better, so after messing around with him for a second, I moved on to the final boss, the Polarities. But real quick, before getting to them, there are variants to the Essophage and Sun Pixie that can only be summoned during specific events. The Essophage variant is pure nightmare fuel, and the Sun Pixie variant just looks straight awesome. Though, like the original Sun Pixie, I struggled with understanding its patterns and how to beat it. I then spent an entire hour fighting the Polarities nearly 20-ish times, maybe more. Never once was I able to actually beat them. This boss functions way differently than most bosses. Instead of having its own AI that targets the player, this boss bases all of its moves on how the player positions themselves. For me, this proved to be a bit too difficult to understand. Even after it was spelled out to me by other people and I watched other people no-hit the boss, I still have little to no idea how to beat this thing or how it really functions. It may just be that this boss works in a very different way than like every other boss, which it does. Sorry, I'm not doing the best at explaining what this thing is or what it does. I just don't get it, so I can't really explain something I don't understand. I figured out a few things here and there, but when it comes to it shooting lasers in particular, I could almost never dodge it. So that's the Polarities mod. This whole experience has been kind of a mess since the mod hasn't been fully ported to 1.4. It ended up being a lot more content than this video or idea really had the capacity for either. I mentioned this before, but when I do this in the future, I'll be spending a lot more time on the mod, as well as ensuring the mod is fully ready to go. I love this mod and really hope that what I've heard about its development coming to a halt is wrong. Seeing this mod get some love and be fully integrated into 1.4.4 would be amazing. And if it does, then I'll have to try it again because it deserves it. I would recommend it, but unless you're interested in the yet finished 1.4 version or are willing to downgrade to 1.4, then as of making this video, it's not quite ready yet. Hey guys, I'm actually officially partnering with a service called Boosteroid. Boosteroid is an online gaming platform that allows you to play, well, let's just say a lot of games. I couldn't find an actual definitive number. But it lets you play these games over the cloud, and it's not another Xbox Game Pass kind of thing. Rather, Boosteroid allows you to play the games you already own over the cloud. This means they won't take up space on your computer's hard drive, and you don't need the latest in gaming technology just to run them. The Terraria footage you've been watching I recorded while testing out the service so you can see for yourself how much you like the performance. This footage was even captured while at an airport on my MacBook, and it's still doing pretty well, I dare say. You should know, though, that you are only allowed to play games you already own on Steam, Epic Games Store, or others, and you can only play the game if they own the rights to the game on the same platform. For example, the game Control is in their library, but only the version from the Epic Store, so I can't use Boosteroid to play my Steam copy of Control. I've added a link in the description with their game library, so you can see if they have games you'd like to play. Just be sure you own the right copy from the right store. You also can't currently play tmodloader at the moment, which is unfortunate, but I've talked with them and we'll see if it can be added in the future. I would also highly recommend that you download their application as opposed to using the web browser version of their service, because I found that the web browser one had some issues with the mouse, at least while I was playing Terraria. So especially if you're playing Terraria, definitely download the application version. Plus, the application version will also remember the games that you've downloaded, while the web browser one will require you to re-download the game every time you launch it, or at least in my experience, that's what it did. So do be sure to download the application, as you'll have a much better experience. But be sure to check them out. Maybe they can let you play some of the latest AAA games on your potato of a PC, and be sure to use the affiliate link below as it helps out the channel a lot.